Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. My name is Guy Kawasaki, and I'm going to talk to you today about innovation. A little bit more about my background. I am here from Silicon Valley, so I live in Silicon Valley, California, and I work for Apple. I was Apple's software evangelist, and then I was Apple's chief evangelist. And assuming that this is not a Windows clicker, when I touch this button, it's going to go forward one slide. And there we have it. So this is a picture of Steve Jobs, in honor of Steve Jobs. I worked for Steve twice in my life, from 1983 to 1987, and then 1995 to 1997. And I worked in the Macintosh division. How many of you use Macintoshes in this room? Oh, lots of you. How many use iPhones in this room? Well, everybody. Wow. I use an Android phone. So I just thought it's one of you? There's two of us? Okay. So I'm really dedicating this speech to Steve Jobs because I learned so much about innovation from Steve. As I said, I worked for him twice, and it was a remarkable experience to work for him. It was not an easy experience to work for him, but it was a remarkable experience to work for him. But before I do that, I want to show you my first experience in Switzerland. So I flew from Dallas to London to Zurich yesterday, and I was so jet lagged that I left my tablet, Nexus 7 tablet, on the airplane. And I got on the car, and we were coming to Bern already when I figured out that I did not have my tablet. So we turned around, and we went to the airport, and to my utter amazement, it was British Airways, and AAS, and this woman had already found my tablet. They were already looking for me, and so I got my tablet back in no time at all. And that's just remarkable. I don't think that would happen in many places in the world. So I feel really indebted to your country already. I mean, where else can you leave your tablet on an airplane and get it back in 15 or 20 minutes? That's not true in many places in the world. So that was my first experience. And then yesterday I got here and I had some time to walk around your lovely city. And some people might point out that there's the museums, and there's the churches, and there's the rivers and all this. But I'll tell you, the thing that I love most that I saw yesterday is this. So this is in a sporting goods store right over there, right? And it's this elevator that it's like no doors, and it's just moving up, and you just get in, and I have never seen anything like this. And you could not do this in California. You would have to get all kinds of special permits. Every passenger would have to sign a legal document saying that they wouldn't sue you if you fell out. I love this. So anyway, I've had two great experiences in Switzerland already, so I'm really happy to be here. Now, let me get into the content of my speech. I'm going to talk about innovation. And I learned about innovation working for Apple in the Macintosh division. I've also been an entrepreneur, and I've also been a venture capitalist. And now I write about innovation, and I speak about innovation. So these are the lessons that I learned from Steve Jobs working at Apple in the Macintosh division. The first thing that Steve Jobs taught me is that experts are usually clueless. They can tell you what's wrong with what you've done. They can tell you what's wrong with your product, and your innovation, but they really cannot tell you what to do in the future. They can only criticize what you've already done in the past. And I think that's a very important lesson for entrepreneurs and innovators, that if you truly want to change the world and be innovative, you can't listen to the experts, because the experts can only criticize. They cannot tell you what to do for the future. Let me show you some examples of experts and how they were wrong. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers This is from Thomas Watson, the chairman of IBM. So he predicted there would be 5 computers in the world. I have 5 Macintoshes in my house. I have all the computers that he thought would be in the world in my house today. Second example, this telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. So Western Union, the telegraph company, said that telephones were of no use to Western Union. Western Union, if you ask me, should be PayPal today. But Western Union couldn't go from telegraph to telephone, much less telegraph to internet. To be fair to Western Union, perhaps in 1877, if you had the first phone, who would you call? Maybe their plan was to teach Americans the Morse code so that they could put a telegraph in every house. They wrote off telephony in 1876. Finally, there is no reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. Ken Olsen, founder of DEC, a great entrepreneur, said that there was no reason to have a computer in your house. How many of you have a computer in your house today? Because there's no reason. If you wanted to, for example, balance your checkbook, you could just drive back to the office and use some check management program running on a DEC mini computer, right? These are 3 examples of what I call bozosity. A bozo in America is a clown, a stupid person, a clueless person. So if you're clueless, if you're stupid, you're a bozo, okay? And I think that bozosity, which is the noun, I think bozosity is like the flu. So how do you fight the flu? You fight the flu by getting a flu shot. A flu shot is a little bit of flu so that when your body encounters a lot of flu, it already has prepared the resistance to the flu. I think bozosity is just like that. I gave you 3 little shots of bozosity so that when you encounter bozosity and cluelessness in your life, you have already built up some resistance to it. Experts are usually clueless. The second thing is, customers cannot tell you what they need. They will tell you pretty much, we want better, faster, cheaper, what you already make. Better, faster, cheaper Apple II. Better, faster, cheaper MS-DOS machine. Better, faster, cheaper Nokia telephone. Better, faster, cheaper Sony Walkman. Nobody tells you what to do for the future. Nobody told Apple to build this cute little box, 128K Macintosh. Thanks to my efforts, there was no software for it. It had 128K of RAM. We thought that was an ocean of RAM. It was $2,500. Today you can buy a great laptop for $2,500. Customers were telling us, Apple customers were telling us, give us a bigger, faster, cheaper Apple II. Nobody asked for something like this. This was the future. The next thing I learned from Steve is that true innovation occurs not when you stay on the same curve trying to make things better, faster, or cheaper. Great innovation occurs when you get to the next curve. Let me show you this with ice. Ice 1.0. In the late 1800s, there was an ice harvesting industry in America. This meant that ice harvesters in the winter would go to a frozen lake or a frozen pond and cut blocks of ice. So their idea of innovation was bigger saw, bigger sleigh, more horses. That was ice 1.0. About 30 years later was ice 2.0. Now you had the ice factory, and the ice man delivered ice to you in an ice truck. Significant advantage over ice harvesting because now it did not have to be winter. It did not have to be a cold city. You could freeze water in a factory anywhere in the world, any time of year. A big breakthrough, the next curve. The third curve was the refrigerator curve. Now people had their own personal ice factory. You didn't have to have the iceman deliver ice to your house. You could have one in your own house. The very interesting historical fact is that none of the ice harvesters became ice factories. And none of the ice factories became refrigerator companies. Because most organizations define their function in terms of what they already do. If you're already harvesting ice and you see an ice factory, you say, why would we do an ice factory? We cut blocks of ice from a frozen lake. If you were running an ice factory and you saw a refrigerator, you would say, why would we create refrigerators? We freeze water centrally and then deliver the frozen water. If you truly want to innovate, you don't stay on the same curve trying to make a better factory or a better ice harvesting sleigh. You get to the next curve or you invent the next curve. That's where true innovation occurs. Macintosh was not a better Apple II. Macintosh was a completely different curve from the Apple II. Next thing that I learned from Steve is that when you present your employees with big challenges, they give you big results. If you give them little challenges, they give you little results. So what you should do if you want to change the world and innovate is challenge your employees in large ways, not little ways. We ran this ad where we were welcoming IBM, the 800-pound gorilla in computing. We were welcoming IBM to the personal computer business. We set ourselves up for a challenge where we wanted to compete with an extremely successful, much larger company called IBM. Steve said we're competing with IBM, not other little personal computer manufacturers. We're competing with the biggest and the best in the world. The next thing that I learned from Steve is that design truly counts. Apple is proof that some people in the world care about design. It might not be everybody, but there are enough people who care about design. This is a MacBook Air. It is thin, it is beautiful, it is sexy, it is light, and you would think that having seen the success of a Macintosh and a MacBook Air and a Mac Pro, you would think that other computer companies would look at that and say, this is what we should copy. And yet, to this day, you can see big, thick, ugly, plastic laptops everywhere. Why is that? Why couldn't HP or Lenovo or Dell at least have the taste to know what to steal? Okay? Design counts. Design counts. The next thing is, for all your presentations, for all your speeches, the key to a great presentation is very simple. You need to have big fonts and big graphics. This is an example. This is a slide of Steve Jobs in action on stage. Let me decompose some of this slide. First of all, he has a very large graphic. That graphic is huge. And it's not even an Apple logo, it's the Windows logo. Secondly, he has the word iTunes. iTunes, that font is probably 150 points. Huge text. Underneath that, he has this very bold saying, the best Windows app ever written. So Apple Computer is saying that it has written the best Windows app, not Microsoft. The components here are big graphics, big fonts, big statement. Many people use a small font, like an 8, 10, or 12 font. They use these small fonts, they read the text. The problem with reading text is that roughly one slide into the presentation, the audience has figured out that this person is reading the slides. This person is reading the slides verbatim. Then they figure out they could read faster silently to themselves than the person can read it to them. So they just read ahead, and you completely lose your audience. Big fonts, big graphics, the key to a great presentation. Next thing I learned is that changing your mind is not a sign of stupidity. It is actually a sign of intelligence, that when things change, you have the intelligence and the courage to change your mind. Let me show you a total reversal that Apple did in 12 calendar months. When it introduced the iPhone, it said, our innovative approach using Web 2.0 based standards lets developers create amazing new applications while keeping the iPhone secure and reliable. Let me translate Apple speak for you. What this is saying at the introduction of the iPhone is that there will be no third-party apps. Third-party apps have to be built as Safari plugins. Safari is the engine. You can write plugins that enhance Safari, but you cannot write a standalone app. And the reason why Apple did this is because they said that the iPhone had to be secure and reliable. Now, you might ask immediately, well, how come you let people write apps for Macintosh? Doesn't my computer have to be secure and reliable too? But nobody asked that. Now, the experts, the experts that I said are clueless, they read this and they said, hallelujah, Steve, you are so right. My phone is more important to me than my computer. It has to be secure and reliable. Thank you for locking out all the developers who could introduce viruses and bugs and ruin my phone. Okay, so this is June 2007. This is May 2008. Press release, Apple executives to showcase Mac OS X Leopard and OS X iPhone development platforms at the Worldwide Developers Conference 2008 keynote. Let me translate this for you. This is saying we want people to write apps for the phone. We want people to write apps for the phone so much that we now have an iPhone development platform, documentation, and tools. So in 12 months, Apple went from we don't want anybody writing apps to keep your phone secure and reliable to we want an app for that. We want everybody to write applications. We want thousands of applications. Now there are 400,000 applications. This is a total reversal. The second time when they saw this, the experts once again said, yes, Steve, you're right. An open system is the way to go. When I saw this, I learned a very valuable lesson, which is it shows intelligence to be able to adapt to conditions, to realize you made a mistake, and to change your mind. Very important lesson. It is okay to change your mind. Next thing that I learned is that working at Apple, value is not the same thing as price. Value is the totality of what you get from a computer. Price is just money, what you paid for it. You could have a cheaper computer, but if it needs more support and more training, it's not as valuable as a computer that needs less support and less training. You could pay more for a computer in dollars up front, but it could be effectively cheaper because of the training and all the other services that have to go with it. Apple spoofed Windows with this commercial. In this commercial, the Macintosh person is, of course, the person on the right side. The Windows person is, of course, the person on the left side. And the Windows person is holding a bake sale in order to raise money to fix the bugs in Windows NT. In other words, Apple's saying, yes, a Windows machine might be cheaper in terms of dollars in purchase. But over the course of the lifetime of a computer, Macintosh is more valuable. And I learned this very valuable lesson. Price and value is not the same thing. The next thing I learned from Steve is that A players hire A+ players. That is, an A player hires a person better than himself or herself. By contrast, a B player hires a C player, and a C player hires a D player, and a D player hires an E player. So what happens is if you hire B players, you're going to wake up one day and you'll be surrounded by Z players. This is what we call in Silicon Valley the bozo explosion. You need to fight the bozo explosion. A players hire people who are A+ players, better than themselves. This is a picture of the reunion of the Macintosh division. And I will say that these are the smartest people that I have ever worked with. At this point, Steve was already very ill so he did not attend this party. But this is the Macintosh division alumni, smartest people I've ever worked with. Next thing I learned from Steve is that real CEOs do the demos themselves. They don't bring up some engineer or product manager or vice president of engineer. A real CEO, a good CEO, a great CEO, a CEO who understands innovation can do the demo himself or herself. If you are an entrepreneur, if you are the founder of the company, you had better be able to demo your own product. This is a picture of Steve inserting a floppy into the first Macintosh during the introduction of Macintosh in January 1984. Steve did the demo. He didn't call anybody else up to do the demo. Steve did the demo. The second thing I learned about CEOs and entrepreneurs is that real entrepreneurs and real CEOs, they ship. You know, Silicon Valley, well, have you ever heard the song Don't Worry, Be Happy, Bobby McFerrin? Okay. If you want to be an innovator, you have to have a slightly different version of that song. The slightly different version of the song goes, don't worry, be crappy. In other words, don't worry if your product is not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. The first refrigerator was not perfect, but it was still better than the best ice factory. The first laser printer was not perfect, but it was still better than the best daisy wheel printer. Real entrepreneurs can ship. They don't simply program and program and program and never ship. That's the key difference between Apple and Xerox. Xerox PARC created many of the concepts that became Macintosh. Xerox PARC could be Apple today, but Xerox PARC focused on technology, not the commercialization of technology. This is a computer made by Xerox PARC, and it had many of the components: the graphical user interface, the keyboard, the mouse with buttons, arguably the precursor for Macintosh. Real entrepreneurs, real innovators, real CEOs, they can ship. They don't just test. The next thing I learned from Steve is that marketing equals unique value. This is all the marketing you need to know. The students in the back, this is all the marketing you ever need to understand in your life, okay? This is the holy grail of marketing. Very simple chart. There's uniqueness on the vertical axis, and there is value on the horizontal axis. This is a 2x2 matrix, okay? If you work for McKinsey or hire McKinsey, you'll pay $100,000 for this chart. Now, I'm going to explain it to you so you don't have to do that. There are 4 corners. You want to end up in the upper right-hand corner. In a 2x2 chart, you always want the upper right-hand corner. You define the axes whatever way is possible so that you're in the upper right-hand corner, okay? Let's go through the other 3 corners. In the top left corner, that's where you have created something that's unique. Only you do it, but it is of no value. In that corner, you're just stupid. You are a clown. You own a market that doesn't exist. Okay? In the bottom right corner, that's where you compete because something you make is valuable, but it's not unique. People slap the same operating system on the same hard disk, running on the same chips. You're Dell. You make something valuable, but so do 10 other companies. At that point, you always have to compete on price. The bottom left corner is the worst corner. The bottom left corner is what I call the .com corner. Because in the .com corner, you not only don't do something that's valuable, stupid venture capitalists have funded competition to do the same stupid thing. So it's crowded and it doesn't exist. This is dog food. In America, we had a company called Pets.com. Okay? Did you have such a thing here? Luckily not. You had Boo though, right? So Pets.com. Pets.com was going to revolutionize the world. Let me explain the pet food business. You have a cow and you have a dog. Okay, it's a supply chain management. You have the cow, you need to kill it, cut it into little pieces, put it in a can, get it to the dog. That's it. That's the dog food business. So entrepreneurs in America said, wow, why is there a pet food store in the middle of this supply chain? Does the pet food store really add value? Do people drive to the pet food store, look at the pet food, taste the pet food, pick the best pet food? No, it's pieces of dead cows in cans. So they said we could eliminate the pet food store by creating an online market for pet food. More convenient, go online and buy it. Okay. The problem with that theory is that dead cows in cans weigh a lot. So even though you eliminate the pet food store, now you have to add back shipping and handling. So at the end of the day, it's just as expensive to buy pet food online as it is to buy in the pet food store. So it was not really valuable. And then stupid people like me in Silicon Valley, because there was pets.com, we invested in iPets.com, MyPets.com, LastMinutePets.com, DiscountPets.com, BooPets.com. There was 10 ways to spend as much on dog food online as at the pet food store. That's the .com corner. What I learned from Steve is the holy grail of marketing, where the action is, where you make meaning, you make margin, you make money, is in the upper right-hand corner. Let me show you some examples. There is a movie ticket buying service in America called Fandango. I have 4 children. We love to go to movies. If you've ever taken 4 children to the movies, you know that it is a real pain to get kids to a movie. And then if you got to the movie and it was sold out, God help you. Right? Even if the movie was not sold out, you still have to stand in line and deal with those savages getting out of line and creating a ruckus. So you really want to know before you go that you have a ticket. For the movie theater that we go to, Fandango enables me to buy the tickets online, print the ticket, and then go to the theater. I know I have a ticket. It's the only service that that theater supports. It's an exclusive for that theater, and it is very valuable. It is in the upper right-hand corner for me. Another example, this is a smart car. This car just came to America a couple years ago. You know, in America, we all drive Suburbans, right? We get 10 miles per gallon, they're about 50 feet long. And a Suburban is pretty much okay if you have lots of parking and you have lots of money to buy gas. The question is, what if you don't have a lot of parking? Well, the smart car is a unique car because every car can park parallel to the curb. How many cars can park perpendicular to the curb? Valuable and unique. And the last example is from your country. This is a Breitling emergency watch. The Breitling emergency watch has an antenna built in it and a radio transmitter. So if you unscrew the big dial and pull out the antenna, it broadcasts signal to airplanes. So airplanes see the signal, and then in America, they send the US Coast Guard to come rescue you. So this is not something you do when you took the wrong exit off the freeway, okay? Because Kevin Costner will be in the Coast Guard helicopter looking for you very soon. In fact, if you do this and it's not an emergency, you have to pay a $250,000 fine. Okay, so this watch though, if you are lost, if you are off the ski trail, if you're freezing to death, if you're in a boat and you've been abandoned and you are about to die, you open up your watch, you pull out the antenna, and this watch can save your life, right? How many people have a watch that can save their lives? There are not many watches that can save your life. This is a unique watch, and if you're about to die, it is extremely valuable. Another example of the holy grail of marketing, valuable and unique. And the last thing that I learned from Steve Jobs is that some things need to be believed to be seen. Most of the time when you hear this saying, it's the opposite. People say, well, if I see it, I'll believe it. But what I learned from Steve with Macintosh and iPod and iPad and iPhone, those were things that no one was asking for. And if you took the attitude that, well, when I see that there's a Macintosh software community, when I see that millions of people are buying iPhones and iPods and iPads, that's when I'll believe that those products truly exist, then it would have never happened. You have to believe first, and then if you believe, then you can see it. People believed in Macintosh and wrote software when there was an install base of 0. People wrote software for iPod and iPhone and iPad before they had critical mass. So one of the keys to innovation is you have to be evangelistic. You have to be enchanting. You have to be able to influence people to embrace what you're doing before that they can see that it truly is real. Because by believing in the future, that's how you can create the future. And those are the key lessons of Steve Jobs and the art of innovation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.